Hi everybody, this is Sean. Today we'll be taking a detailed dive into how composers provoke their audiences through the narratives they represent. When composers compose text, they generally go through a planning phase where they decide on the structure, character development, and most importantly, ideas, values, and attitudes. To persuade the audience, composers must appeal to ethos, logos, and especially pathos. If done right, composers can provoke their audiences to inspire change, reveal, and question cultural practices. Pathos is arguably the most powerful and impactful out of the three rhetorical devices. As human beings, no matter how rational and logical we think we are, our decisions are purely driven by emotions. One of the clearest examples of this is impulsive behavior. Picture this. You're watching Netflix and an episode has just ended. A little play next button appears, to which you impulsively press. You don't pause to think if it's the most logical decision to make, or if an authorial figure such as your mum approves of it. You're still going to go through with watching that episode. Your emotions override everything else. This is the power of emotions, pathos, a natural human phenomenon that affects us all. Composers, through effectively appealing to pathos, can provoke and influence their audience into thinking, believing, and acting a certain way. Shakespeare is the real master of this, demonstrating how composers can manipulate our emotions through the plebeians in Julius Caesar. The plebeians are portrayed as being easily enticed, fickle, and purely persuaded based on emotions. This is clearly evident in Act 3, Scene 2 of the play, where Brutus and Antony both speak at Caesar's funeral. Brutus, like his character, gives a speech that heavily appeals to logos and ethos. He even opens the speech encouraging the plebeians to think rationally rather than to react emotionally. Censor me in your wisdom, awake your sense that you may the better judge. Throughout his speech, he continuously employs logical reasoning and rational arguments, which fosters an attitude among the plebeians that Caesar's assassination was necessary to uphold the liberty and the freedom of Rome. However, this all goes out the window with Mark Antony's speech. Antony opens the speech and instantly changes a rowdy and victorious atmosphere into one subdued with emotional weight. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. Once the mood is set, Antony strengthens this sense of mourning and sorrow. He was my friend, faithful and just to me. When the poor have cried, Caesar hath wept. After questioning Brutus's credibility and authority, he begins to emotionally manipulate the audience, shifting the grief into rage. You all did love him once, not without cause. What cause withholds you then to mourn for him? Bear with me, for my heart is in the coffin there with Caesar, and I must pause till it come back to me. This speech heavily appeals to pathos, which makes it more powerful, memorable, and persuasive to the plebeians than Brutus's speech. This is evident in what happens thereafter. Even Antony himself knows that by stirring up emotions, he has created a powerful beast that cannot be tamed. Now, let it work. Mischief, thou art afoot. Take thou what course thou wilt. In the Coen brothers' Hail Caesar, manipulation through narratives is also clearly evident. The film highlights how Hollywood syndicates every aspect of the industry, whether it be through its own productions or through tabloids, shaping the public's perception of actors and the industry as a whole. Central to this is Eddie Mannix, whose primary role is to fix actors and to cover up their scandals, ensuring that only a controlled narrative is released to provoke the audience into following a certain narrative. Furthermore, we see Whitlock beginning to question the cultural practices of capitalism, as is persuaded by the narrative created by the communists that questions the morality of capitalism, appealing to logos and pathos, whilst also evoking indignation. Why should the studio be able to take the money, the value created by our labour? Although not entirely obvious due to the film's humorous nature, Hail Caesar also consistently unveils and questions modern-day cultural practices, including the role of religion, exploitation, and power imbalances through its subtle yet powerful narrative. One of my all-time favourite authors, Chimamanda Adichie, beautifully explores how narratives can influence ideas, values, and attitudes in a speech, The Danger of a Single Story, which is based on a lived experience. I'd like to close this episode with a quote from the speech. Stories have been used to dispossess and malign, but stories can also be used to empower and to humanize. In summary, composers can strongly provoke their audiences through the narratives they represent, especially when effectively appealing to pathos, ethos, and logos. Thanks for tuning in.